Hello everybody. It's been a little while since I've done a musing video, and I feel that I want to muse today about Beltane, the Blood Mothers, Ancestry, the upcoming energies, Temples of the Blood Mothers, which is a product which is going kind of viral right now. I've released photos of it earlier, and we will talk about it right at the end if you're interested. If not, if you just want to see images, head on over to Instagram. Hit me up, let me know how you feel. And I'm actually going to start this musing video with a poem, a soul song from my book, Songs of Shades, Volume 3, Witch Blood. And this kind of ties in the energies that we're going to be talking about today. Witch Blood. I have salted the earth with bitter tears. As I have walked this path, I have bent and broken every bone to hear the forest speak. A witch is made and made again, spirits lilting, ever present, whispering nonsense and providence alike. I was birthed to this. Wrenching against death from the start, a keeper of shadows, priestess anointed in blood. To speak my name, they speak my name to lessen my gravitas, or to seek to veil me in shame. It only lands if we swallow, and witches, we know how to spit. A simple measure of fire and wit. You cannot unmake what belongs to the Dark Mother, who roams in fireside and decayed boughs alike, the blood in the leaves dripping with rot and alchemized life, cycles born with Cheshire grins as the moon rises. I hold only to the will of my ethereal mother, who knows the branded withstand the fire. Ever have I danced at the fringes, wondering if I will ever be let in, doubtful. Witches were not born to popularity. If they speak to the core of themselves and not in pretty witticisms or platitudes or self-serving fear-mongering, I think I will go back to the forest, where the vines tangle underfoot and the crows speak of ancient things that mankind has long forgot. I will shift my shape into fur and claw padding against bloody leaves and feel the witch blood stir once more in my veins. Welcome to Beltane Musings, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about some themes that are pulling on all of these echoes from within this poetry, my channeled Poetry Within Sacred Space. And let's just leap in. Whoop! The beautiful fire that we have in the background, as you can see. Something that I have been musing around over the past few weeks is that as the energies of Beltane approach, to me this year, they do not feel, in the Northern Hemisphere, I will add, they do not feel particularly sensual. They do not feel particularly sexy times, because we're all in a pandemic and social distancing and all the rest of it. So it doesn't feel like that to me. And Beltane's a weird energy for me anyway. Walpurgisnacht. I prefer the German name, which I cannot pronounce and just butchered, so feel free to yell at me in German. I'll enjoy it. But I was a bit off anyway, because obviously I'm nowhere near being interested in that kind of union in my own life right now. And so I wondered at first if perhaps my feelings about the energies coming forward for Beltane and how to celebrate them were being coloured by my own experiences. And to some degree, of course, they are. All of our experiences are. So I took a moment and I was feeling out these energies, and what occurred to me is they kept rolling in. The spiritual waves kept rolling in, and the dialogue was around the energy of blood mothers. the energy around ancestry, honoring ancestors, the past lives that we have lived, which echoed through. And something that I have wanted to talk a little bit about, which is red tents and honoring the matriarchal line, of which we all have a matriarchal line. So before anybody gets fussy, like, this is about honoring the women within your family, which you have. Everybody does. And why anyone would get arsy about honoring that is their own shadows and own to deal with. But there we go. So as I was focusing on the energies of what this meant, I had the following messages, the following feelings coming to me. I was blown away by the process of connecting to the ancestral bloodline. And we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit, because I personally struggled initially to connect to the ancestral bloodline. But I was blown away how deeply the meditative process came. As I created, I could hear all of the ancestral women in my line singing and calling, howling and dancing, ringing bells and hammering drums, the clashing of shields, the slow clunk of dusting grain, the weavers, the magic makers, the blood in my line. And something has been whirring around my head and in the spiritual ecosystem, and downloading that from the universe, which is the act of blood in the earth and blood on the earth. And it came to a climax, if you will, a very Beltane climax, as I was working with the energies of creating the energy behind, the energy matrix behind Blood of the Mothers, Temple of Blood of the Mothers, which we'll discuss at the end. And the climax of this came to me that it was not just blood, lifeblood into the land, but the death blood into the land, and how the symmetry between Beltane and Samhain at two sides of the year, cutting the Celtic half in the Celtic two halves of the year straight down the middle into light half and dark half of the year, and these two liminal points of celebration, of ritual, when people honor ancestry and life and death, are actually so closely merged this year that it is not just Beltane has these energies like is normally expressed, or Samhain has these energies like is normally expressed, but they kind of converge in such a way that perhaps they always do, to be fair, because something that I have said for a very long time is that none of these things are as separate as people make out. But I think it really is, the focus of this year really is just how interknitted these energies are. And on Patreon and at various points in different videos, we've been talking about the idea of blood in the land. And something that the Morrigan showed me very early on in a spiritual meditation in my path was the idea of the battlefield in all of its horror and all of its gore was actually one of these sacred ritualistic moments, because all these people were bleeding into the land. They had lived, fought, and died on battlefields. They had left their life essence, their life blood, bleeding into the field, such as it is. That battlefields were actually the culmination of decisions, of choices, of aggression, of life energy, of people's lives being played out for a moment in almost like a microcosm of life, and the battlefield became that microcosm, and all of that blood and gore, which is, you know, very violent, but it's one side of the Morrigan, was bleeding into the land, to have fought for the land, to have died for the land, to have that possessed that pure conviction of will, and then that would be transferred into the sovereignty of the land over which Morrigan governed. And therefore the battlefield became this grotesque altar to mankind's need to be sovereign, need to dominate, need to grow and fight with one another. Some of the animalistic primal essences of mankind bleeding into the land. And she talked about that quite early on with me as a form of sacrifice in its own way, and how she governed over the battlefield. And so this honoring bled into the land, which is her, which is mother, which is goddess and sovereignty. And over on Patreon, we've been discussing how we feel disconnected from the land right now, and therefore offering a little life essence into the land helps with the process of reconnection with the energy of holding ourselves as a part of the spiritual ecosystem, as realizing that all life is connected through the spiritual ecosystem, and the kind of exchange of life energy, a little drop of blood, into the physical land on which we live is actually a very evocative magical process. And so it came from that essence of that kind of mother energy through the land and sovereignty. And there will be another video on Patreon first, and maybe later this one will be on YouTube as well, talking about why I've called them the Morrigan mother, and sort of giving all elements and aspects of that. And so these vibrations came through in weaving a path, weaving a thread, weaving through the spiritual ecosystem in terms of land, blood, temple, ritual, sacrifice, honoring, into the Beltane energies overall for a lot of different people, including myself. And ancestry and past lives, and the past life thread was carried through from the previous work that we were doing with Dom Nu into the culmination of blood mothers and past life lessons, and what red tent had come to mean to me up until a point. And so we moved from the idea of bleeding into the land in one way, and that crossover point between Beltane and Samhain. Now, I think Chris is the first person that ever really discussed menstrual blood onto the land as a spiritual practice. It's not that I hadn't heard of it in different forms, but actually just bleeding on the land. I think Chris was the first person who mentioned that to me, and that has been discussed in certain blood tent and what would you call them? Presentations that we go to mutes and listen to people speak about things. And so that, to me, in its essence, or the essence of cleanly and sanitizing, being very sanitary about it, like bleeding on the land. I have the diabetic pipette things that you can get to highly sanitize, but use a drop of blood. So that to me is life force being bled onto the land. And then the opposite of that is the battlefield, where it's death blood, life blood and death blood basically being bled onto the land, and the different energies that they carry within it. Now, at all times, life energy, life force carries within it death force, and vice versa. So all of these things are intermingled. There is no separation. For every moment we are living, we are also dying. For every moment we are dying, we are also living. There is no separation with those energies. They are contained within the vessel that is us and infused with our soul spirit. And so the blood of our lineage, such as it is, and we're going to be very careful now, because unfortunately around this area of blood magic, which we have just been discussing, and lineage, there is some horrible vernacular, horrible conversations that go on, and it's very eugenics, it's very racist, it's just not worth breath, to be honest, because the way that we are all intermingled throughout history, the way that we're all thought to come from 7 matrilineal lines, in Europe especially, it's all descended from 7 matrilineal lines. And you can trace DNA all the way back to Africa originally, things of that nature. So we're all interconnected in a way that perhaps we don't honor as much as we should, but the bloodlines definitely do, for better or worse. And so when we are looking at honoring the blood mothers, it is the way that our blood sings to us of lessons learned, of ancestry, of the women that stand behind us. And I've had some very beautiful and very evocative ritual experiences, meditative experiences that have come through, not only for myself, but for other people recently. And that has been about connecting to the female line in particular, and all the masses of women that stand behind them. And there has been some key lines that have crossed over into my life and have connected these dots. And one of them has been red thread. Red thread as a symbol of blood, and red thread as tying. So in red tent ceremonies, and if you don't know what a red tent ceremony is, it's a women's only ritual circle space which honors the menstrual cycle. Depending on the priestess who leads it, it depends on what is, some people are very arsy about it and won't let young women in or older women in and things like that. The priestess that ran ours was not, and she also welcomed trans women and all the rest of those who might feel displaced or discriminated against. She wouldn't allow discrimination, and that's one of the reasons I went to her tent. So but what they do in the opening ceremony is they have red thread, and they tie their red thread around their wrist, and they state who they are on their matriarchal lines. And if they're not happy with one relative, blood relative or whatever, they can leave that out, which I do, and they can honor the ones that they want to honor, or they can just state of unknown and of all the women and use it like that. And then the red threads are then passed on to the next person, and all the women are bound by the red thread in the circle. The red thread is then snipped, and you can wear it, take it with you, etc., to honor the bloodlines and the connection to all women everywhere, and all women who have ever bled in any capacity. So that's the way that I prefer to look at it. Anybody who, in the matriarchal lines, all women who have bled in any capacity, whether it be menstrual, whether it be emotional, whether it be bled for what they believed in, died on the field of battle, and so on and so forth. That's how I connect it all into an energy of ancestral women and honoring them. And so for me, these red threads have come up in meditation of connecting to women's ancestries, and that has been the symbol of blood in the veins, the red thread, and the connection there is really beautiful. So that is one way, by the way. Sorry, I'm having to shift about because I'm sat on the floor and I'm not comfortable. That's what you get for belly dancing in the morning. Or right in the back, excuse me. So the red thread is a wonderful symbolic piece of witchcraft that you can use in rituals for Beltane, or honoring your ancestors, especially your matriarchal line, in any capacity whatsoever. So you can definitely do that as part of your witchcraft. We may talk about that more in Patreon, I think. We might. So if you're having trouble connecting to the idea of your ancestral line, of the women that came before you, and this can be for a whole host of reasons. So if you are disconnected from your immediate family, you don't know who your immediate family is, and you're like, what do I do? And I was like this for a very long time, because I was so disconnected from my immediate family that I couldn't connect to the idea of ancestors behind that. That there was a line 1,000 strong, waiting to be heard, to be felt, to be connected with, to be honored, and to speak their messages into being. Mothers upon mothers upon mothers. And there was also something that I did connect to already, but I wasn't quite connecting the dots originally to it being ancestral. So the way that I talked about blood on the land, about honoring the land spirits in that way and honoring the goddesses of the land, that's actually a connection to ancestry, because it's the earth is our ancestor, as Chris is fond of saying. And we come from and are connected to all of these spirits through the spiritual ecosystem. As an animist, I believe that everything vibrates, everything has a spirit, everything has a consciousness, and we can connect with and discuss spiritual matters with the trees, with the earth, the spirits of the land, earth and sea. So these are all interconnected, and they have always birthed us into being, and our mothers also. And that comes a through line from again, that was just before the Morrigan cycle. We were talking about a Domnu cycle, and Mothers of the Land, Sea and Sky was very much part of the Domnu cycle. So that kind of thread flowed through into the Beltane musings. So if you're having trouble connecting to the idea of your ancestors because of the immediate family or something around that, or knowing that perhaps one ancestor was not a very good person, things of that nature, my answer has always been, well, kind of sidestep it then and go directly to source, go to the roots, go connect to the earth and the trees, and go and listen for the ancestors who are willing to speak and have lessons that are helpful, that are pivotal, and that are necessary. Fire is a really great way of connecting to your ancestors, and there's something about the combustion, the crackling, the noises, the pivotal nature of fire being at the center of many rituals of both hearth and home, and then magic. Fire is a transformative force, as we know, and so when we are looking to transform our attitudes to our ancestors, or transform our attitude to our ability to contact, listen and understand from the spirits, then fire is a great ally for this, because it both destroys and creates, because once something has been burnt down, new life can come forth, and that mother energy is very much within that space of the release of new life, of creativity and of energy, so that we can begin again. And also there's something in the Blood Mothers line which is very much about stories and songs. It's two things which are very, very, very dear to my heart and have been my entire life. And the oracular tradition is very Celtic, within the Celtic side of my blood, although it's also within the Scandinavian Viking side of my blood. And the telling of stories, the passing down of legends, of parables almost, it's not technically parables, it's more like a folklore, more like a myth, of remembering the songs and the lessons in your blood, remembering, speaking, honoring, remembering that through your blood thrives and remembers the potential of your entire bloodline. So you are all of their hopes and dreams and memories in action. That all flows through you, so you can't be disconnected, not really. And as we remember these lessons of blood, we have to consider what we really think bloodline and blood magic really is. It's not an approval stamp to work with a particular deity. It's not an approval stamp to work within a certain pantheon. That's done through blood, sweat and tears, honoring the systems, being connected to particular deities. It doesn't give you a right. There is no such thing as birthright, I don't think, in spiritual practices. The bloodlines of the mothers are very much about the work. It's very much about how you create, how you manifest, how you step out into the world. And working with these energies of blood and fire, they are ancestral, but they're not a right, not in the R-I-G-H-T sense. They are in the R-I-T-E sense. They are in the magic right sense. They are in remembering and honoring and sitting with these energies. And remembering that if you have lived before, which I 100% believe we do have past lives or parallel lives, as I've discussed many times, not getting into here, or the video will be even longer, then you can have been a mother in different lifetimes, and you will have different mothers in different lifetimes, and you'll be connected to matriarchal lines in ways that don't you don't even think about, in ways that explode the brain, because we don't think about how we are connected to everything and everyone through all these parallel experiences. Well, I do, but then my head goes. And so you are not disconnected. You cannot be disconnected. And having a bad experience with your own family is off-putting. I understand. I was there. I know how that feels. But it's the same as if you've had a bad experience with one type of dog. It doesn't make all those dogs vicious. It's the same as if you've had one bad plate of a certain kind of food doesn't make the entire cuisine null and void. And we as humans are quick to throw a baby in bathwater out. I will wholeheartedly admit that and state that I know that is definitely a thing. But at the same time, we need to overcome that shadow of tarring everything with the same brush. So this Beltane, I feel that it's very much an energy of working with life and death, blood magic, of working with our ancestors, of working with spirits. And sometimes that's as easy as speaking that into being, the wish to do so. I wish to speak for the women of my matriarchal line. I wish to honor them with every breath that I take. I wish to sing of them and their deeds, their lives, their deaths, and all the things they endured. I wish to speak of the women of my matriarchal line, known and unknown, who birth things into being, be they children, be they ideas, be they lessons. And I want to speak of my ancestral line through the land. The blood in the land, the life force in the land, the blood magic in the land that flows itself into me as a nexus point, as a witch, as a human being, as a spirit, as a voice. So I hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Many blessings. And before we go, because I nearly did it, I'm going to show you the smooch, and we're going to talk about it. So if you don't want to know about the physical product, thank you for joining us. And if you do, because you should, because oh my goodness, I'm so in love with this, and this is the wrong one. That's Moss Mother's. Moss Mother's also smells delicious. It is a mother's, so I will just pause briefly and resume. So Moss Mother's is already on the store and is the collection of the Moss Folk, rather, in the end. But that's forest magic. That's probably why I picked it up. But that is not the premise of this video, you naughty smudge. Whoops. So the Temple of the Blood Mothers. Temple of the Blood of the Mothers. I've already read about how it came through and had that red tent Beltane energy. So we're going to just... Oh. So it looks kind of black on the camera. And I'm just wondering... So it looks like earth-dried blood, is what it looks like. Oh, goodness. And it smells divine. This is my favorite smudge I've ever made. And I just adore it. Oh. And it is of ambers and earthiness and deep sensual spices, a little pepperiness, and it's just rich and deep and earthy, and and it's culminating around the idea of the temple of the Blood Mothers. So for me, the temple of the Blood of the Mothers is a circle of women, a circle of ancestral women tied in bloodline, across bloodlines, with red thread connecting them, with their bare feet on the ground. And they have bled in the earth, and they honor the bleeding in the earth of all women, however they have bled, howsoever they have bled. And they have bells on their feet, and they stamp their feet. They drum, they sing, they howl, they cry, they scream, they honor the ways, all the ways of women. This is the temple of the matriarchal lines, where all the stories are remembered, where all the stories are heard. Many blessings.